Hey, how we doing, guys? This is Space Traders. We're at Space Traders. We provide the value of the stock where everybody else just tells you the price. I am the rocket scientist. And with me to my left, you're right. He's always right, except when he's left. That's going to be the Stock Jedi. Greetings, Stock Jedi.
What's going on, guys? How you doing?
So today we want to look at the trifecta here. It's all come to fruition here, and we want to see if there's any value in it. We've got Moderna. They already were the first player in the game, as you know. Moderna's already sold and distributed 41 million of 100 million batches of COVID vaccine, and they're on the slate for another 200 million more from the US government. We have Johnson & Johnson, who just got into the game, ding dong, kind of like the Browns. He's kind of interesting, exciting, been around for a while. Let's see if they make any difference. Johnson & Johnson, their vaccine, they're already slated for an order of 100 million by the US government. And then, of course, we have Pfizer, which is the third largest pharmaceutical company in the world. That's the big dog. And they already have, let me just check my notes here. For Pfizer, they're at 600 million ordered by the US government. So where do we want to begin this, Saw? Should I do some Q&A with you? Do you want to just start with an opening monologue?
Well, sure. I think it's important that we discuss the vaccines, particularly with the introduction of Johnson & Johnson, and not only how it compares to the other companies, but overall what we feel the vaccine distribution within the United States and the rest of the world is going to affect the economy and our return to life measures as we try to turn the corner here on the pandemic. And so even though you guys out there know me as a stock Jedi by night, by day, I actually work for a company called Kokomo 247. And our mission is really focused on public safety and health. And for me in particular, over the last several months, our focus on COVID-19 has been developing software tools to help people return to work, return to school, return to life. And the big aspect that we're focused on right now is the vaccine management and distribution through our software that we have. We're providing digital vaccine uploads and verifications for individuals that need to do so for their work, or kids coming back to school, or in any environment where vaccine proof is necessary. And so that's been part of our suite of packages from our safety cloud that includes a COVID screener, contact tracing, case management platform. Our focus is really trying to help people get back to a sense of normalcy via their work and their life.
And with normalcy comes efficacy. And let's see if this is an issue that has value on the stock market. When we look at the efficacy of Pfizer and Moderna, and I'm not making this up, I know the odds of this is like hitting green twice in Vegas, but Moderna has reported by independent parties as having a 94.1% success rate. That's after the second dose. First dose is like 67%, and then it jumps right up to 94.1. With Pfizer, there we go. There's a tie right there, 94%. Now with Johnson & Johnson, independent studies are saying 60% effective. Johnson & Johnson are coming back and saying, well, 60%, but we're 85% effective in protecting against severe COVID. Does this make a difference in terms of which company to invest in?
No, I don't think that really makes the big difference. In terms of the vaccine market in itself, anything above 50% is considered fairly effective. The usual vaccine is about 50 to 60% effective.
And that's an FDA approval standard, as long as it's more than 50%.
Correct. And as far as these vaccines are concerned, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is significantly different from the Pfizer and Moderna. The most obvious difference is the way it's structured. It's not an mRNA vaccine. In addition, it only requires one shot. And based on the data we have thus far, that one shot, while 60 to 70% effective, also doesn't provide some of the side effects that we've seen from both Moderna and and Pfizer, of which, patients have reported, feeling sick or feeling dreary or dizzy or whatever the case may be after the second shot. So far, the Johnson and Johnson vaccine is reporting basically nothing more than a sore arm after the first and only shot.
Well, that's interesting. I know for me, one of the I actually took the Pfizer vaccine, and one of the side effects is I kept taking my wife to Chili's. She really loves the nacho plate there. That's just guilty as charged. But let's get back to efficacy here, and actually, you know what? Let's go to delivery. We know that with Pfizer, you got to get it down to basically sub-Russian and Arctic temperatures for delivery. I think it's like minus 80 Fahrenheit or something insane. Moderna actually was able to lessen the load on that, and you can deliver it closer to room temp. What's Johnson and Johnson's delivery?
Johnson and Johnson's delivery mechanism is the easiest. It can be stored in a basically refrigerator as opposed to a standard freezer, and it can be distributed at the basic doctor's office, things like that. So Johnson and Johnson in the long run can be distributed at more locations because its ability to be effective with limited storage requirements is much more the case than both Moderna and Pfizer. Pfizer, as you mentioned earlier, being the most extreme, but however, it doesn't require that same frozen tundra like it did before, but nonetheless, it still requires a degree of cold storage, much more so than the Johnson & Johnson. So in terms of application, in more locations, especially in more rural parts of the world, the Johnson & Johnson
there's our aha moment for today.
For mass distribution.
That is definitely our aha moment, right? Because it's all about companies that work smarter, not harder, and being able to do that at room temperature. I think you really hit a nail on the head there. They can distribute it to countries. I mean, you're going to take this to Africa. Good luck on the infrastructure being able to handle negative 80 degrees Fahrenheit in their storage of the vaccine. So I think that's a pretty good sales point. I mean, would you agree with that?
Well, I mean, I think the most important thing for investors to consider is the fact that, honestly, and this is just my opinion, so everybody should, of course, do their own research, but investment in any of these biopharmaceutical companies should not be based strictly on just the vaccine alone.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to Johnson and Johnson as well as Pfizer, they're billion-dollar companies. They bring in north of 40-50 billion dollars in annual revenue.
Yeah, and I'll quote you. I'll actually kind of side note that for a second here. Johnson and Johnson, they did revenue of 41 billion last year, whereas Pfizer did revenue of 84 billion. So they have loyalty with brand products, hundreds of brand products from heart medicine to, Johnson & Johnson, they sell diapers too. So, but the point is that this is a blip on their screen. In fact, the day that they announced Johnson & Johnson that had been government approved, the next day the stock actually dropped to 0.5%.
Well, I mean, the key thing is part of the effort with these companies is they're not using the vaccine as a profit center. I mean, you can imagine the PR nightmare if that was the focus of any of these major companies. So a lot of them have some help from government funding, obviously through Operation Warp Speed, and the specific details of who got what money is negligible. But the point is that given the pandemic and given just the sentiment of pharmaceutical companies and the way they make a ton of money off of medication already, the last thing we wanted to see was Pfizer, Moderna, or Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, or any of the other companies holding hostage a vaccine to make a tremendous amount of profit off of people.
And I want to address the optics of that, because if you look at the optics from, dare I say, the medical Johnson & Johnson point of view, because it is a business. I mean, let's be honest here. I remember seeing a little joke on a doctor teaching a group of doctors, and up on the board and the green screen or the whiteboard in the back, it said, a dead patient is no longer a profitable patient. Also, a healthy patient is no longer a profitable patient, which brings up my next question. Is this going to be a one and done, like the Browns ever chance of making the playoffs again? Or are we looking at kind of a TB tuberculosis scenario where there's going to be, rebuys, and every year you're going to have to get your COVID shot, even if not for practicality, out of fear.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. I don't think there's enough data to presume that the Browns won't continue to make the playoffs. But I do know that, for example, the both the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine, that second shot is really the booster shot, right? The first shot is the primary shot, second shot is the booster shot. And so in theory, over time, you would think that you will need a booster shot again, or looking at it as we see variants of the flu. That's why we have different flu shots every year. There may be variants of the COVID disease, which will require or suggest that there will be variants of the vaccine that may have to come out in the future. I don't want to say for sure that this is the one and done shot, but in theory, and in just basically, if you look at the data of other similar type of diseases, there may be a requirement for a secondary shot or another shot sometime in the future, depending on how one, this round goes, and two, how COVID overall and the SARS-2 virus evolves over the course of time.
Yeah, I see the booster shot as a strong sales pitch just because of what it does, in terms of, just science. I mean, a booster shot is basically acknowledging that, hey, you've already got the antibodies in your system, and the booster shot is going to lead to a little more tight mitosis separation, and it's going to strengthen the already existing antibodies. So it seems like a pretty easy sales pitch on that, from optics. Let's go ahead and go to the growth of the stocks.
Sure.
Obviously, we talked about 84 billion and 41 billion for Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson respectively. Moderna, I was looking at the numbers. Now, Moderna, back in 2017, they were at a height of 240 million, about 240 million. I don't have my papers with me, but that was in 2017. That was their revenue, their total revenue. There's a company that's been around since 2010. They do have a couple of products. They do have a couple of connections. But what's interesting to note is that they went from 200 to 240 all the way down to 60 million in 2019. And so the stock was not jumping or pumping. Suddenly, boom, they're a smaller company. I think we can agree, because they were a smaller company, this was their big bread and butter. This was their main source of produce and product and revenue. And so the stock has shot up. I mean, what's the numbers on that for the last 3 months, 6 months?
Yeah, I mean, Moderna obviously had the most to gain in terms of the just everything overall, because they were the smaller player. And I think what we were looking at, they were closing at about just below $150 a share today. And so something like this moves the needle considerably. However, and I caution investors out there, the run for Moderna was a while back, right? I think the best opportunity to invest into them was before the vaccine has come out, because they've done their big spike, right? They were hovering at around, what, $40, $50 a share for the longest time.
Yeah.
And that was just during the early part of COVID, when the rumors were starting. And then when Moderna started announcing the clinical testing and trials, they bumped all the way up to $60 or $70 a share. And then, of course, when everything came out in December, they've jumped all the way to 140, 150. And, I can't tell you if they've largely peaked there. I mean, I think they've hit as high as $180, $190 a share. But the most important thing to consider is that for these three companies and companies in the future, the most important thing is the brand name recognition now that is in place. I think for a lot of Americans and a lot of people all over the world, the term Moderna, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, well, Johnson & Johnson probably had the most brand name recognition. Pfizer second, especially.
Yeah, because Pfizer's more of an international company. So
Right. Well, true. And then Johnson & Johnson isn't only just medicine. They make a lot of household products and things like that. But
Exactly.
at the end of the day, with the amount of media attention given to these three companies overall, everybody coming out of this, those brand names will be extremely familiar. So as they develop new medicines in the future, I think there should be a shift in terms of revenue.
And on that note, let me go ahead and share a screen. You still got me on co-captain here,
Yeah.
captain, captain. All right, so
Yeah.
let's just take a look at Moderna here in terms of pipeline, because if you're going to pick any of them, I'm going to say Moderna. Yeah, they've already hit their peak, but Moderna is still cranking out. I mean, they've got 300 million coming up on the docket, but I digress. Let's, in terms of brand loyalty, how's that going to translate? Well, Moderna's company history, infectious disease, rare disease, autoimmune. That's great. But here, take a look at this here. And by the way, this is not from their website. I don't like researching from an actual company's website because obviously they're biased. Obviously, they want you to believe and believe the hype. This is from Modern ATAX or Moderna. Yeah, so I like that one. 24 development programs, 13 having entered clinical studies. So I think, the fact that they're still cranking out, they're not just sitting on this, they're cranking out their clinical trials, phase 1 to phase 4, and then boom, it's on the market. So what you're telling me is that combined with a newfound brand loyalty, because I mean, let's be honest. I mean, if we're going to go that route and that argument, Budweiser is the worst tasting beer in the history of liquid, and people still buy it. It's a billion. Anheuser-Busch is a stock that just slowly just does its thing, and nobody ever stops and looks to their buddy and goes, "Dude, we're drinking cat piss." Excuse my French. So I think brand loyalty is a powerful thing you've brought up.
Well, I mean, when it comes to medication, it's important. Like let's use, for example, let's stick with medicine here. Tylenol, which is developed by Johnson and Johnson, is a very popular and famous brand. It's a brand name of a particular type of medicine called acetaminophen. Now, when you go to any typical drugstore, you can buy Tylenol, or as people call it, the off-brand version of Tylenol, the CVS version, the Walgreens version, the Kirkland version at Costco, or whatever. It's all the same medication, acetaminophen. It's the same exact thing. It's drug profile is the same. What it does for the human body is the same thing. But because when it comes to brands that we trust and we're familiar with, like Johnson and Johnson, people will buy Tylenol more often than they'll buy the generic brand of the medicine, even though the Tylenol costs twice as much.
And
right?
the word has been embedded. It's nomenclature now in just every daily media and what have you. In a movie, people don't say, "Hey, you want a Kirkland tablet?" You say, "Yeah, my wife was, we didn't have sex last night, so she took a Tylenol, and I stared at her and said, yeah, you can't think of anybody else either." So, but the point is that it's actually like, it's like a verb in our society.
Well, and that's the thing. I think a lot of people know Johnson and Johnson, the brand, because it's highly publicized and it's obvious in a lot of products. Pfizer, maybe not as much, but we're also very familiar with a lot of their drugs, like Lipitor, for managing your cholesterol, things like that. Zithromax, which is a form of zithromycin, and then of course one of the most popular ones, I think one you're very familiar with, David, Viagra. Which is a form of sildenafil. So
hold on, wait a sec. Wait. I think what is it? It's 9:46. Hold on, about 5 seconds. I get I set a timer for this. Wait. That's much better. Yeah, I have it intravenously fed in. That's the buzzer sold separately.
while there's a lot of different forms of sildenafil now, because Pfizer's lock on that drug is over, people still equate it with the term Viagra. And they
exactly. And that's what I'm talking about. The Tylenol. Thank you, because I couldn't think of another term that's basically just sucked in verbiage that we use. Everybody says Viagra. Hey, why don't you get a Viagra? Hey, get a Tylenol. It's all the same medication, right? But it goes back to your argument. It's brand loyalty that's been embedded.
Well, and that's the interesting thing, because now with the COVID-19 vaccine, there's not specific names for the COVID-19 vaccine that's being advertised to the public. It's just being advertised based on the manufacturer.
Yeah, who would be able to pronounce that stuff?
Moderna, Pfizer, Johnson and Johnson. So then in the future, the consumer, when they go to a drugstore, they'll start, I would imagine that these companies will market their company name more so than the brand, or at least
Yeah.
in a similar path, so that when people see, oh, this medicine is from Moderna or this medicine is from Pfizer, let me take a look at that because I just recognize the names of those companies. And name recognition, brand recognition is extremely key. Now, that's good for these companies moving forward. Does that mean it's an ideal investment now? No, I think there's a lot of people holding the bag if they bought in Pfizer at like $45, $50 a share when it was that right at the original announcement of the vaccine. And now it's down to like into the mid 30s or upper 30s. So
Right.
like I said, again, the COVID-19 vaccine alone isn't really the big needle mover for any of these companies moving forward. I think the most important thing we need to take away from the vaccine is the fact that this is the best tool in a whole toolbox of items to defeat the pandemic. And as the pandemic gets defeated, everything else starts to return to normal, which then improves the market in general, right? We have a lot of companies that are just struggling because of COVID.
So let's talk about that. Let's shift gears for a second here. I think we're in agreement that all of these companies might be a nice long-term play. I tend to side with Moderna a little bit more in terms of long-term, but it's not going to shake the needle. It's not going to shake a ton of money apples from the tree. Let's shift to what you're talking about here. When things get back to normal, what are we looking at here? Are we investing in Carnival Cruise Lines for the first time here? I mean, what are we talking about here?
Well, I think now is a good time as ever to start considering jumping into any of the return to normal stocks. They call these the COVID stocks, which are companies that have been decimated by the COVID-19 virus, the pandemic, the shutdown, and have largely been hurt, but will return, have a significant spike once things open up again. So anything in travel, leisure, entertainment, those are big opportunities now because look, it's all about perception, right? We know that stocks aren't really based on the stock price isn't really based on what's going on today's, but more so what's going to potentially happen tomorrow. And so, Biden just initially announced that his timeline to get all the vaccines out to everyone would be towards the end of August, right? That was the best case scenario in terms of 330 million Americans getting access to the vaccine. And then today he changed that.
What was it? What is it?
He thinks it's going to be based on the amount of vaccines that they've ordered and agreed to with both Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson and Johnson, and their ramp up profile for distribution. He made a statement today that by the end of May, all 330 million Americans who want the vaccine should be able to get it. So that is extremely significant. And I think
that's huge, dude. I mean, it makes sense too. Not to steamroll you here.
No.
But, oh, mommy's sleeping. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. Thanks. Daddy's trying to get YouTube hits, but you can stay if you want because since you match. So, dude, 1 billion. I mean, if you add up all the supplies here, you've got Moderna at 300, Pfizer at 600, Johnson and okay. Thank you. Eat your vegetables. I love you too. And then, yeah, I know. 300 million Moderna, Pfizer, 600 million Johnson and Johnson, that's 1 billion. I mean, why wouldn't, dude, if we just distribute it, right? So it's pretty believable, plausible statement when he says May. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, just remember the numbers. I know that you said 1 billion, but for two of the companies, 2 shots are required. So it does bring it back down to 330 million.
Gotcha.
Okay. Gotcha. But to all the people watching, this is your window to invest in companies like Carnival, AMC, things like that.
Wait, did you just say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I had some sensibility stuck in my ear. Let me get that out. Okay, now, okay. Go ahead. You can say AMC again.
Yeah, AMC, which unfortunately has been a meme stock, which is priced at higher than it should be. But it's still, it's still something to consider. I'm not necessarily AMC.
I got to counter on you. I got to counter on you with this one, dude. If you look at the last 5 years, I mean, AMC went from 25 all the way down to God, it was at 50 at 1.5 years ago. And it's just, if you look at the chart, it went all the way down till 10 until the Rootits or Reddits or Rabbits or whatever the hell they are Dude, I got a Walmart 72-inch TV for like $100 now, man. I mean, why do I need to go to the
David,
theater?
my recommendation is not based on the long-term viability of those companies. My investment advice here is just riding the rebound, so to speak, and the return to life that the vaccines and everything is going to provide. So there is
Okay, so
going to
that
be
goes
that
back to want versus need.
momentary spike of return,
Momentary spike.
right?
Okay, so good. I'm glad you clarified that. Because yeah, I do definitely see a momentary spike. I mean, I've said this before, we've talked about this before. I'm going to reiterate it again. You want to purchase stocks where ask yourself, is it a want or a need? And if it's a want, is it going to translate into a need? And psychologically, getting out and seeing the movies when you haven't seen them in 6 months, I mean, that's a need. Can you imagine if we weren't allowed to hump each other for 6 months and then suddenly the floodgates are open.
I think the impact of what the return to movie theaters is going to have is going to be much larger than just the movie theater. It's going to be an affirmation and a confirmation that life is returning to normal, that it is safe to go out. It's safe to be with friends, with family, to go do the things that you love in terms of gathering together. So movie theaters are a huge representation of that. It's a staple for people to easily be able to go out and hang out, much more so than dining, because dining, though restricted and limited, has still taken place during COVID for the most part. But movie theaters is a completely different environment where you're sitting stationary in a close environment for 2 hours or more. And so it's important. I think it's important for the government. I think it's important for retail to see movie theaters come back. And I think there's going to be a significant push to return to that. And again, I think all the movie studios, they've got a lot of money to make up. So they're going to try to push the return of going to the theater again. I think, people in general took a lot of these things for granted, normal life, and not having it for the course of nearly a year is going to reframe how we look at just the simple things in life, and as far as socializing and going out. So we can
Okay.
certainly see a return to that for at least within the first year. And
All right.
these movie studios, they've got a backlog of blockbuster movies that haven't been able to come out, right? When movies
Don't say blockbuster. That's not very inspiring. Don't say blockbuster.
okay.
All
They've
right.
got a
Let's not make
runway.
it. We
They've
made
got
it a
a
blockbuster night back in the 80s. Okay.
David,
No
to use language that space traders would appreciate. They've got rockets lined up that haven't been able to launch,
There we go.
right? Because of the pandemic. So when you think about it, if in 2020 and 2021 they had at least 5 to 10 movies that they knew were going to rocket to the moon, well, now in 2022 they've got 20 of them because it's all been sitting around waiting. So the movies that are likely going to come out are going to be high-profile films.
Okay.
They're going to attract a lot of attention.
Yeah, actually, in Wonder Woman 3, she finds her jet. So that's going to be a nail biter. I know when I was a kid in high
Spoiler
school.
alert, bro.
No, I'm just saying, dude, clear. Hey, man, clear is the thing, Saw. When I was a kid in high school, our school colors were clear. Hey, I'm not naked. I'm in the band. So I will piggyback one thing on AMC since we're kind of talking about maybe a little short-term boost here. And let me get your opinion. AMC, they're starting to talk about renting out, and I guess they are. Are they renting out some of their theaters for gaming right now? Is that a viable like side hustle?
It just depends on how they want to do it. It could be arena for people to watch esport tournaments. I mean, the viewership of esports tournaments continue to rise. I think for the gamer to see something on that giant of a screen is going to be extremely exciting. So, I mean, we'll see. I think it's important for companies to be able to shift and make changes. And we're going to see that moving forward. Despite the vaccines, there are some changes that are going to be permanent. And we certainly see that coming from my company, because things like going to football games, concerts, and shows, it won't be like how it was before, where you just roll up and show them your ticket and go in. Similar to how 9/11 changed the profile of the point of entry for these events, where metal detectors were required. We do feel in our industry that the venues that have thousands of people gathering in a compact space for a long period of time will require some type of screening method to make sure that they're at a minimum asymptomatic of the virus. And number two, if you have the vaccine, you may be able to show a digital passport that grants you particular access or entry, or I can see in the future venues that may have a VIP section, where the V stands for the vaccine section, where individuals who've been vaccinated can gather and people feel
Oh, like the Scarlet Letter, with the big red A for adultery. You get to wear the PE loaner shirt, big V for vaccine. Yeah.
So, for companies like ourselves, we're looking to see how the market is going to respond to that. We do know that, right now, the NCAA, the NFL, sporting stadiums are trying to figure out what is the best process to allow 60, 70,000 people back into our stadium, and to make people feel especially comfortable. So things like self-screening and digital tools to verify antibodies or vaccination are definitely being considered. And right now we're working hard to make sure that those tools are available for companies that are looking to do that. And then, as well as, the government and local municipalities and public health are weighing the options of whether or not vaccines should be mandated at the workplace, right? Let me ask you, David, if you have a restaurant, you go to a plaza, right? And there's two restaurants there and you don't care in particular which food you want to eat, but one restaurant, all of their employees are vaccinated, and the other one, you don't know if all their employees are vaccinated. Do you think you will have a propensity to pick one restaurant over the other based on something like that?
Absolutely. There's only two essential emotions, I think, that drive the human condition. And sorry, it's not love, guys. Okay. I've been married 12 years. All right. I'm happily married. That's not the
Thanks
point.
to the Pfizer Viagra.
Yeah, thank you. Nice timing. But I think the two essential emotions that drive the human condition is hope and fear. Hope and fear is what drives kids to do their work. Hope and fear is what drives businesses to produce. Hope and fear is what drives cities and companies to grow. So just based on fear, yeah, I'm going to the restaurant with the all you can vaccine. You know, Good question.
Yeah, so I mean, those are things that we have to be ready for in this post-COVID world. And to be clear, the post-COVID world doesn't mean that COVID is completely gone. I think it'll kind of rear its head like the flu, and something we'll have to live with. But hopefully, with the tools that we have, including the vaccines that we're talking about now, as well as all the other um, measures we have in place to counter this, we'll be able to live in a society and in a world where it doesn't impact our way of life significantly, at least to the point, not to the point where people had to lose jobs and lose their livelihood, as well as just
Right.
the mental health of being stuck at home and isolated during the shutdown.
So just to wrap this up here,
Yeah.
and well said, I always appreciate your insight. To wrap up, you're not going to get rich this year on any of the three pharmaceutical companies. All right, you might as well just bet on green in Vegas. But there's good long-term investments, and as Saz pointed out, with the brand loyalty and with Moderna becoming highly recognizable and developing brand loyalty, I think we've kind of talked our way into maybe Moderna for the long term at some point. Um,
Well, they certainly have the biggest upside of the three, because the
yeah,
other two
there
are
you go. The biggest potential upside. Absolutely.
correct.
Absolutely, because it's their sole basic driving force, which is totally different than the product structure of Pfizer and Johnson and Johnson. And then, of course, for your other purchases, maybe consider something in travel and leisure as things open up. As you aptly put, we're moving from August to May as an opening time. Right now, it is March 2nd, 10:02 p.m. Pacific Coast. That's going to give you April and May. May's coming, baby. I think it's time to start diversifying. I got nothing else from my end of the galaxy. What about you, Saw? Anything else you want to add to the queue?
Well, I just want to tell people, hey, like you said, it's March 2nd. We've gone through a lot. It's been quite a bit. So we're at the final leg of this journey. And so hang in there, stick in there. We're getting we're getting to the end of that tunnel where that light is. And so it's only a couple more months. So do your best to continue to stay healthy and safe, And but we're getting back there soon. So I know it's been a long journey for all of us in this somewhat darkness and abyss, if you will, but a lot of things to be positive for. So whether you're watching this video for health concerns, or your concern is more on the investment side, both areas I think is going to see tremendous improvement um, going into the summer. And as far as rocketing to the moon, whether it's a stock or your health, I think overall for all of us, our life is going to open up and be a rocket in itself into the future.
Speaking of rockets, and thank you for that very sentimental closure. You guys had a chance to check out the products of the Viagra. I think I walked over there and spit shined a couple of stars. Listen, thank you so much, everybody, for all you that watch. Please like and subscribe. We're going to keep cranking out these videos, and we hope they help you. We try to give you the value of stocks and maybe just a little bit extra. Signing off. Thanks for your time, everybody.
Thanks, guys.